If you are the CEO at a company, you know the majority of your team is using AI in some capacity, but you might have no oversight. You might have
no control, no governance.
No governance.
Yeah. And it doesn't hit my bottom line. It's like, okay, great. So now Tim's on the beach at Koh Samui in the afternoon because he used AI this morning, but like I didn't save anything as a business owner, right?
Exactly.
Hello and welcome to the Animals Podcast. I'm Ty Magnan, the CEO at Animals.
And I'm Tim Metz, the Director of Marketing and Innovation.
This season on the Animals Podcast, we're pulling back the corporate curtain to show you how the largest, most complex SaaS teams get content out the door. Hear from leaders of some of the biggest names in SaaS, sharing the systems they built, the battles they fought, and the lessons they learned along the way. Today, we're chatting with Lane Scott Jones, the Director of Content and Corporate Marketing at Zapier. In this episode, we chat with Lane about how she has measured the ROI of her content programs and advocated for more resources and hires. She covers how she scaled her content team from 4 people just 4 years ago to about 30 people today. And we dig into her philosophies on how she and her team is using AI to boost efficiency at around 30%. I'm excited for you to listen to today's episode. Lane, thanks so much for joining us on the Animals Podcast. As our avid listeners know, we ask each of our guests this very important question at the top of each episode. Lane, what content are you consuming lately?
Okay, I know that this maybe isn't what you are thinking of, but what came to mind immediately is the latest season of Hacks. Have you been watching this?
No, I don't know Hacks.
Okay, this is a Max series. It's about 2 comedians, and that is my like post-work unwind TV show.
Nice.
Yeah, and then maybe a little bit more relevant to this topic and this audience, I've really been loving the Hard Fork podcast. That's also my way of staying pretty tuned into what's going on with tech and AI, but in a way that brings a little comedy to the situation. So maybe that's the unifying thread, is trying to keep it light.
Yes, I get it. Work is intense right now, especially at Zapier. I mean, you all are in the middle of the AI conversation. Before we get into all of that, would love if you could give your intro for our audience, for those that don't know you.
Sure, I'd love to. And I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for having me on. So I have built and grown content marketing programs at B2B tech companies, including Campaign Monitor, Emma, and Zapier, where I am now. And in that time, I've scaled high-performing teams from 0 to, I think we're a team of 30 right now at Zapier.
Wow.
We've driven over 450% ROI from our blog, and we're seeing 4.5 million plus monthly visitors and overseeing millions of dollars in annual spend. But the thing I'm most passionate about as a content leader is really earning content a seat at the table when it comes to being seen as a strategic engine of the company and not just a services function. And I actually got my first job in tech at an agency that was focused on B2B tech companies. And this was back in 2016, but I was working with companies that were doing things like machine learning. And so even back then, I was at the water cooler talking and thinking a lot about AI. And well, that was also the year Westworld came out. So yeah, the water cooler kitchen conversations were really, really entertaining. And then, after that, went to lead marketing at Campaign Monitor, which is an email marketing platform, and landed at Zapier about 4 years ago. When I started at Zapier, the content team was 4 people and really focused on the blog. And in the time since, I've taken over not just content marketing, but corporate marketing, and really focused on expanding the reputation and visibility of the work that the content team has been doing far prior to me getting there, but especially accelerating it in the past 4 years has been really exciting, really interesting challenges, everything from growing the team in headcount to pivoting strategy. And then most recently, of course, the AI boom has become everything that we think about, talk about, write about.
Of course. I mean, what a journey that you've been on and are on, even in this present moment. That's pretty awesome growth. And I am curious, when you mentioned you believe content specifically, and probably corporate marketing at large, deserves a seat at the table. Why is that? And it seems like that exists at Zapier, if you can take us inside the 4 walls of the corporation too.
Yeah. The reason why is because having worked on content teams my entire career, I know that we are often among the closest to the customer of anyone in the org. Because thinking about the Zapier blog, for instance, we're getting this leading data about what people are most interested in reading about, talking about, thinking about. With AI, we saw this right when ChatGPT was taking off. We started publishing content around AI, and the data that we're seeing about people's engagement with that, these astronomical numbers when it comes to traffic, activations, that was a signal not just to content, but to the company at large. Like, oh, okay, this intel will help us shape our strategy. Because of course, Zapier as a corporation was already starting to think about how do we enter the conversation or sort of continue to grow and accelerate the way that we're already in the conversation. And it was really cool to see the way that we were able to use content data to help inform our understanding of the audience and what they were most interested in learning about. And at Zapier, I would say when I came in, it wasn't necessarily a perfect setup where content was seen as a strategic engine. Content has always been a core driver of growth at Zapier, especially in the organic search world, because Zapier has this long legacy, again, predating me, of not only a really high value, respected, beloved blog, but also an SEO program where we were able to scale these programmatic pages to drive insane levels of growth.
Yeah.
And so it's been respected in that way. But when I got there, I would say it was a really small team. They were cranking out a ton of content, but we weren't necessarily in the rooms where we were able to drive strategy. And what I really wanted to do was connect the dots between the fact that the content team is driving this much growth really shows that we have amazing intel to share that can inform not just the content strategy, not just the marketing strategy, but the company strategy at large, the product strategy. And so those are the bridges I tried to build over the last 4 years alongside my team. And one way I did that was really figuring out a way to quantify the success of the content team and the actual business impact it was driving. That was step one to getting buy-in for headcount, budget, and a seat at the table.
So what did this practically look like? The idea, so I imagine, it's clear you were intentional about bringing data towards stakeholders in order to elevate I don't want to use the word importance, but it did come to mind here, the importance of content, and use that to inform, as you mentioned, the product strategy, the company strategy. Really impressive. And I love that idea. Of course, bias as a content, marketer. Take us in the room. Like, did you build decks out of this? Like, what were some of the insights that you brought forth? And then if you can give examples of like downstream impact that the data you brought forth had, it'd be really interesting to hear.
Yeah, it really was about raising the visibility of content. It wasn't that content was maybe not respected. It's just that there was so much more growth and momentum and impact that I knew we could be getting from it that we were missing out on. So functionally, what I did was worked with my head of content operations, and we kind of stole from the advertising world this idea of return on ad spend, except we coined it return on content spend.
Rocks. Love it.
Yeah. So we used our performance marketing model to calculate the content's return on spend.
Smart.
And it was mapping out like the investments we were making. So things like freelancers, agencies, software. We did mock up numbers for headcount and then tech and data support. So the resources we were pulling in from other parts of the company. That was the investment. And then the return, we looked at real revenue resulting from content signups with a 3-year multiplier.
So Lane, you did that by like a first touch model, meaning like, say organic search traffic, people that came through that channel and ended up converting and then paying, you counted those dollars towards content ROI?
So I think the really cool thing about this number is we went really conservative. This is actually just looking at blogs, so not even counting content campaigns. And it was based on a last touch attribution model towards signups.
Last touch. Nice. Lovely. And so it didn't count those programmatic pages that I think, hey, audience, by the way, if you haven't seen Zapier's like programmatic strategy, it's like a little, I don't want to call it old hat, like, it was built a while ago, but those pages are pretty incredible. Great B2B programmatic use case. But anyways, you didn't count those programmatic pages in your content evaluation of ROI?
That's right. Yeah. So the ROI at this point really was just looking at the blog because that's where we had the majority of our team staffed and where we were putting the most resources. And it's also where strategically I wanted to get buy-in and investment for more. So I wanted to hire more. I wanted more budget. So we really just focused on the blog so that we could have a really concrete idea of what business impact the blog itself was running. And we ended up doing this calculation and finding that the blog generated 454% ROI.
I feel like that should get you all the headcounts and resources you could ever ask for, right?
I completely agree. When we calculated that number, we had to run it so many times. And this is
like, this can't be right.
This can't be right. It's too good to be true. But yeah, looking at the numbers, that is, and again, it's a pretty conservative look at a small slice of what the content team is working on. But the blog at that time was driving nearly 70% of all organic search visits. But it was driving product adoption too. And I should say it is driving product adoption too. It was amazing. Nearly a quarter of our influenced activations and almost half of our influenced upgrades were coming from the blog.
And so if you're Wade or like your CFO, right, are they not like, Wade's the CEO. If you're Wade or the CFO, are they not like, Lane, like spend more money on this? You know, like I'd be throwing money at you almost.
Yeah, I think they had to see the numbers though. I think at the time our CMO he came from a performance marketing background. So he had that return on ad spend mentality. And this really was catered to, let's get this into a really quantifiable place to prove the value of content. Because there are so many things outside of even what we calculated here that content is driving value toward. But we wanted to frame it in these numbers to get his buy-in. Yeah. And finally, when we presented it to him, his response, which I wrote down and like having quotes, is, well, with these ROI numbers, tell me why I shouldn't give you advertising's entire budget right now. Which was music to my ears.
Yeah, and you're like, why? Yeah, I mean, what was your answer? I maybe you should give it to me.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, hand it over. I'm ready to run with it.
Yeah.
Well, I'm also curious about that. Like, what were you planning to do, or what did you do after that? Because then it's like, all right, you get all these more resources. I guess that's what happened. And then, where did you? What was your plan to scale then?
So much of our content team's impact was limited by the amount of content that we could produce because we were a relatively small team. We rely a lot on freelancers. So my very first asks were hiring more and additional budget toward our freelance programs. And then we also established at that time a content operations function so that we could have somebody who was running really focused on the data analysis and finding those pockets where we were experiencing really high ROI or there was a really high opportunity so we could then double down.
Smart.
So it was really expanding the content team beyond just being a blog team and being seen as a truly strategic operation. So yeah, we got buy-in, grew the team. Like I said, at that time, we were 4 people. Now, including all of corporate marketing, we're at 30, but just the content functions, we've expanded beyond blog to include content campaigns, operations, and we have a video team now, a dedicated video team that is running YouTube and webinars. So that's a team of 15.
If you're like most B2B content marketers, you want to lead the conversation in your industry. At Animals, we help B2B software companies do exactly that by creating standout, survey-driven, state-of-the-industry type reports that help you grow your brand authority, backlinks, and pipeline. In just 12 weeks, we run a process that helps uncover narratives from a unique data set packaged into a beautifully designed flagship content asset that your whole team is going to be proud of. Book a consult now at animals.co/whitepapers and find out how to set the new benchmark for your industry. And so, Lane, it sounds like most of the content team and investment is focused on the PLG model for Zapier. But you also mentioned maybe before we started hitting record that there is this enterprise motion that you maybe are supporting as well. Can you help me understand, if you have like $100 to spend on your content team, how many are going towards this PLG motion today versus the enterprise motion?
Yeah, this is a really interesting time at Zapier, and it's a time I think most companies like us get to eventually, which is the switch, not from PLG to SLG, but really starting to shift the balance of our resources from, we have these programs, the blog being a great one, or a great example, where it is running. It's a machine. Like, we know we feed $1 into it, we get 454% ROI. And that has always been really focused on our PLG motion, because prior to the past few years, we haven't really had a sales motion at Zapier.
Right.
But to get to the next level of growth, we have introduced that, and we're all trying to build the sales-led muscle. So now I have my team divided into the I guess, you might call it PLG, but in our world, we call them builders. So they're the people going into Zapier and actually just they're signing up, they're in the product, they're building their automations using AI. That is where a lot of that program is focused. And then, of course, now with the introduction of the enterprise sales motion, we've got the buyer. And that's where we're starting to think a lot about the thought leadership, enterprise marketing, content assets. So yeah, we're at the place where I think a lot of our creative energy and a lot of our production energy is now turning toward the enterprise motion, just because the foundation is been laid so well.
Yeah. And how would you describe the differences between that enterprise motion? You mentioned thought leadership sort of as like a category of content. Are there different mediums? Are there different ways you're distributing it? Are the people you're hiring different for the enterprise focused or the SLG motion, as you call it?
Yeah. It's been a really fun puzzle to start to try and solve or even map out, because the way that we're looking at it is they are very different mediums. They're different topics for each of our audiences, the builder and the buyer, but they're feeding into one another in this really interesting way, because we're imagining our buyer is managing a bunch of builders. And so on the builder side, what we're really trying to do is demonstrate through real life use cases how they can implement AI and automation into their workflows in an actionable way.
Right.
And that's been a huge focus over the past 2 quarters. And specifically with this enterprise campaign we just launched, we're doing a 30 use cases in 30 days sprint, where we're just having people within Zapier recording how they're using Zapier and AI to show what we call like AI automation inspiration. This is what it actually looks like for a company to run their entire IT help desk with 3 people and Zapier. Because I think with AI, and I've felt this myself as a marketer, there is the conceptual. Yes, I know I want to be using this. I know it will be really helpful, but how do I actually implement this in a way that feels not just like, oh, that saved me a few minutes, or that is sort of a novelty, but where it becomes a core part of my team's workflows. And I think to do that, you need to A, see how other people are doing it, and then B, get in there and build it yourself. So that has been the content strategy around builders. So that's sort of bottoms up. We want to get the critical mass of builders using Zapier. And then at that point, we have some leverage with the buyer. So on the buyer side, I think it's probably a bit more of your classic B2B playbook. We're doing reports. We just released one on the rise of shadow AI. So it's kind of taking the same topics, but obviously speaking to this different audience. In this case, just as an example, we're talking about how if you are the CEO at a company, the majority of your team is using AI in some capacity, but you might have no oversight. You might have
no control, no governance. Yeah. And it doesn't hit my bottom line. It's like, okay, great. So now Tim's on the beach at Koh Samui in the afternoon because he used AI this morning, but like I didn't save anything as a business owner, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And you've got this sort of massive tech sprawl happening too. So we're speaking to the buyers in more of a, this is happening, everybody is using AI, and here's what it looks like to roll out an AI strategy that's focused on ROI, where you will be measured by AI ROI rather than having either no oversight or having people using it in a way that is, again, personal productivity, but not driving real revenue.
Interesting. So it's almost like for enterprise, the topics are different. They're a little more strategic. They're a little more heady, if you will. And like for your builder audience, it's a little more practical, how to achieve this. It's a little more use case oriented. Is that a fair distinction?
Yeah, I think it's a distinction, but it's not a hard line, because even if we think about our CEOs, I'll even say Wade specifically. If Wade was browsing LinkedIn and saw a really cool use case where somebody was using AI and automation, he's passing that along. He's passing that down to me or to, my peers on the marketing leadership team. So I think the use case is maybe a unifying thread throughout. It's just that the way we frame it is going to be different. For the builder, it's going to be, here's this use case and click into this template. We've got it all set up for you, and you can go ahead and set it up and run it yourself right now. For the buyer, for our CEO reader, it's here's a bit more of an inspirational look at how teams like yours are using AI for them to then take back to their teams.
Speaking of which, we actually loved your article about how Zapier you talked about hack nights and hackathons in order to get more AI adoption and excitement happening internally. We passed that around our leadership team and spent a lot of time chatting about like, how do we do this in animals, right? Using them for inspiration. So you got me with that one for sure.
I love to hear that. The AI hackathon we did, the very first one, right when all of this was breaking and we were trying to figure out what we were going to do about it as a company, as a marketing team. We took this week off from our regularly scheduled programming, and the imperative to all of us was just play around with AI, experiment, build something, try it out, roll it out. And I can't emphasize how much just having that space and time is so important, because maybe AI as a skill, a marketing skill, is the kind of thing that you can read as many articles as you want. You can watch videos, but until you're in there building it and breaking things, I don't think it's really sinking in. And you do need time away from business as usual to play around.
Yeah, probably right. So one, Tim, I know you're not sitting on the beach in the afternoon after
I
you
just
exam
going
in the morning.
to say the opposite. I know you're sitting on the beach. I felt found out.
I know you're working hard over there, so I just wanted to call that out. But listen, I'm sure, Tim, you've been waiting patiently to ask some questions about AI, so I kind of want to throw the rock over to you.
Well, one thing I want to say, I had it also in the other direction. I posted a little zap that I find very useful the other day on LinkedIn, and then I very quickly had like 15, 20 likes within the first 30 minutes, and then there were like 80% people from Zapier. So everybody was really on top of that. So I don't think Wade was in there, but like there were lots of people, and I was like, oh, there's Zapier. Oh, they're also Zapier. So that's funny to see that indeed everybody's kind of looking at that and paying attention, it seems.
Oh, yeah.
But the other thing so we talked about like, you have the builder, you have the buyer, and you kind of, I guess you can kind of, you can plan that in advance. But what happens when something like, let's take MCP, right, which I think is now very much on your radar, comes along? Like how's that driven in the organization, and when does content get pulled in, and what does that look like? Is it that it's much more like a timely, urgent topic, and how do you approach that with the team? I was curious about that.
Well, you're right. I think I'm not the first guest to say we cannot plan that far ahead anymore, because who knows what's going to pop up. MCP was a very frantic week for us figuring out. We say this phrase, building the plane as we fly it, all the time, but it has never felt more real than with some of these new introductions of AI-related technologies. I think MCP is a really interesting example of how content plays into overall marketing strategy. We have a Zapier MCP offering. So we were launching that at the same time that product marketing was developing the messaging, at the same time as content marketing was being tasked with publishing blog posts, both top of funnel and product launch related. So we didn't really have the luxury of, okay, we've got this pristine, perfect messaging document from product marketing. It's got all the use cases. It's got the competitor comparisons. Our content team at that point really acts in a very journalistic way, where they're going out, they're doing all this self-education on what MCP is and what it means to our readers, our audience, our customers. And they're producing this content at the same time as everything else is rolling out.
Right.
And I think that is such a testament to having a content marketing team that is tuned in, not just to, going back to earlier, the services mentality where they're waiting to be assigned something, but our blog editors were out there creating this content in advance of most of the other activity happening at the company, which is really cool for me as a content leader, because then when our product folks or Wade comes to me and is like, hey, we really need to publish an article about MCP, I'm like, already done. We've got it. We've actually got a whole list of about a dozen of them that are related to this. One really cool development recently was that we were ranking #1 on Google search for what is MCP, which is a full testament to, again, my blog editors and blog team and writers, because they jumped on that at a really critical time. And it did mean that they had to drop other things. So that constant prioritization exercise during these fires is the name of the game for us right now.
Yeah, it's tricky. And Lane, for our audience, what is MCP? I think it's important for folks to understand, especially as it pertains to how Zapier is playing a role in this emerging category.
So MCP stands for Model Context Protocol. And Zapier's MCP allows AI models to execute real-world actions by integrating seamlessly with Zapier's 8,000 apps that we integrate with. So with MCP, AI can take action on your behalf. Instead of you just interacting with it as a chatbot, It's actually doing things like automating workflows, sending emails, updating CRMs, scheduling meetings. So as you can probably imagine, this is a huge development. And for Zapier particularly, because we have this massive number of integrations, it is a massive opportunity for AI and automation to work together and actually drive that real business outcome that we were talking about.
Yeah, incredibly cool. I want to shift into discussing how you as a content team or as a brand team at large are using AI in your production. So yeah, maybe like what's your philosophy on using AI if we want to start there? And then what are some practical use cases that you find valuable?
We love AI at Zapier for obvious reasons. I think it has been such a creative, experimental time for us to figure out what AI looks like in our workflows. When it comes to my AI philosophy, especially with the content team, we are fully committed to using AI in our workflows to make our work easier and better. It's deeply embedded across essentially every aspect of the content production and distribution engine now. But we also are very keenly aware where AI falls short. And we know that the things that people love about Zapier's content and have always loved going back a decade are that we are writing with this very human voice. And I would have described this quality of Zapier's voice and tone before I started. It was very different to me as I was sort of interviewing and applying, even from your standard corporate tech blog, because it is so warm and human in the value it's giving. And as Zapier, like a lot of our top performing articles are almost wire cutter type evaluations of best apps. And the reason that those are so high performing is because we have a human who's going through and testing all of these apps and telling you this is the best one for your needs.
Wow.
So how do we bring in AI and all of its best qualities without losing the thing that makes our content valuable and leads to our rankings being so high, and is why people love Zapier's blog. So what we've done is really embrace AI across all elements of the pre-production workflow, research, finding opportunities like drafting and outlining, producing structured content and SEO and data insights, but making sure that we're keeping the writing piece of it to the humans, where we're able to deliver value and really stay true to Zapier's voice.
Can you give an example of what that then looks like in a workflow? Like how do you do that?
I've been talking to my team about this, and we're just crunching some numbers. And by incorporating AI into our workflows, we are already we produce a lot of content. Our top of funnel blog had been producing 70 blog posts per month. And
Wow.
Just by using AI within our workflows, so not using it to actually write anything, we've been able to increase that by almost 30%. So a couple examples of how this is showing up in our workflows. One is doing content gap analysis, so looking at our entire corpus of work and finding gaps. And it's just helping us brainstorm and get the juices flowing. We also use it for small copywriting tasks. So we have Zap templates. I was mentioning those earlier, which is, hey, here's an example of how somebody is using Zapier. Click in and actually just try it out. So we do have a chatbot that takes a Zap template and writes the copy for the template page. We're writing metadata for blog posts, drafting blurbs for the blog email. So you can look at all those tasks as long-form writing adjacent tasks that would take up our editor and writer time. And now, because we have built these processes using AI to generate those things, we are able to take that short-form copy and produce it a lot more quickly. Some more fun examples are creating fake customer data for screenshots. We have a bot that generates, using fake businesses based on one of our editor's dogs, examples that we can use when we need to anonymize things. It sometimes is with pop culture references, but they're automatically generating fake lead and customer data for us to use in our examples, which is a constant requirement for the types of content we create.
I feel like that one was developed during the Hack Week.
It absolutely was. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
All
Hack
right.
Week, the creative juices were flowing. Another one I love, and I think this is all credit to our customer advocacy team, who is producing our customer stories. And of course, customer stories are driving so much of Zapier's marketing and content marketing. Previously, we had a multi-hour long process of interviewing the customer, transcribing it, figuring out the best pull-out quotes, working with a writer to create it. One of our customer advocacy marketers was able to create an entire workflow where she took from the Zoom transcript, she was able to port that into the workflow that she created with AI and automation and take the process from multiple hours to, from the transcript, generating a full customer story outline in 30 seconds. And that is really incredible in terms of efficiencies gained, but also because we have, at that time, one customer advocacy marketer, 2 million customers using Zapier, and a constant need, like sales is beating down our door to get more and more enterprise customer stories, especially because that's such a big piece of the way that we're selling. And so that was an incredible use of AI, I think, to really scale up what still just one small team can do.
That's an even higher ROI than 450%, I think.
I think so too. Yeah, once you start thinking about the value of an enterprise deal. Another one I'll share. So I mentioned that the content marketing also includes the video team. And so a big push for Zapier's content marketing program has been using YouTube as a platform first space where we can be recreating the similar success that we saw on the blog with top of funnel, with AI topics, with covering things in real time. And we've seen a lot of really interesting success there and momentum. But with anything, with any social post, with any YouTube post, some are successful and some flop. So our head of video growth created this really cool social post and YouTube video grader, where he took a couple different elements from engagement, views, click-through rate, and is able to assign each of them an ROI evaluation, essentially. And he uses that because we work with so many influencers. He uses that to inform what our investment is with these different partners. So we're able to look at all the influencers we're working with and using AI and automation, automatically give them like a good, great, excellent rating, and then immediately use that to drive more or less investment there.
That's smart.
Nice.
I really like that. So rumor has it, according to our AI research bot, that there is a LaneBot out there that maybe helps with some editing. Can you tell us about that?
Yes, the LaneBot. So the LaneBot was a Hack Week innovation for me personally, because that first Hack Week, the next week, I was going to Italy. So I mentioned I have been doing the full-time travel, taking advantage of remote work for the past 3 years or so. But this was going to be a pure vacation. I was going to be off Slack and off my computer for a week eating pasta and gelato. And so I built a LaneBot. I fed it all of my content marketing POV, our strategy documents, leadership style notes, my README, and set up the LaneBot, shared it with my team and said, if you have any questions while I'm gone, I will not be available, but the LaneBot can answer them. And then, of course, as like an added bonus for them to interact with the LaneBot, I told them if they could get her to give them a promotion, then we would look into it when back. So we had a lot of fun interactions that they were keeping in the thread for me. But the LaneBot was really fun. And I think I always say that, as a kind of fun novelty, but if folks, either you or folks on your team, are looking to play around with AI, I think that's a perfect starter project, because you do learn so much about building out the configuration and the instructions and tweaking and fine-tuning it. And now I think with agents and with the way that we're able to integrate now with all of these different apps, the LaneBot could really grow in power. It could really start actually doing a lot of things for me. I'm a little scared to give her that power, though, because she's just like me, and I know it would go to her head.
You can just spend all your time in Italy. Just permanently move to Italy.
There's an upside to that.
I like this plan.
Maybe it is a happy ending. I want to ask about your AI tech stack too, if we can go just one more question there.
Well, a lot of what we're building is built on Zapier. So Zapier has our chatbots. That was sort of one of the first tools we rolled out. And now we have Zapier agents. We have Zapier MCP. So typically within that, it's working with ChatGPT. But the challenge when we think about AI and when we think about automation is to drink our own champagne. So I just built one of my first agents on Zapier, and it was so fun. We did a customer meetup, and I went to it here in Nashville and got to learn how to build an agent. And my starter project was just building an agent to manage my inbox. And I really loved that hands-on experience. I don't know what it's doing, but I really don't get that much email anymore. So it feels like a success. So yeah, we're always experimenting. And again, because Zapier can integrate with so many of our apps, think about the things we're using on the content side. There's Airtable, there's YouTube. We're just trying to pull from all these different data sources and troubleshoot as we go. But that is the overall goal, because also at Zapier, we've got things like interfaces where you can build landing pages. We've got tables where you can store data. So keeping it all in the Zapier cinematic universe, for lack of a better term, is the way that we're trying to build our AI tech stack.
Awesome. Tim,
Makes
any
sense.
other questions for Lane?
Where should people follow you if they want to stay up to date?
Follow me on LinkedIn, Lane Scott Jones, for my latest on AI and automation and everything we're trying out and experimenting with. And you can follow me on Instagram if you want to see my next trip to Italy.
Nice.
Awesome. Thanks so much for joining us. It's been a pleasure having you.
Thank you. This is so fun.
That was awesome.
Yeah, it was great.
Yeah, I was just thinking about like a PLG like the role of content in a PLG, or like, sort of a high volume organization, is significantly more important and strategic typically than in an enterprise focused organization. Because like, as you heard from Lane, like the vast majority of her content resources are focused on strategically delivering growth, right, for the business, kind of like on their own, end to end,
Yeah.
versus an SLG or an enterprise play, like you're supporting a different motion, and therefore it's harder to own those growth metrics outright like she does at Zapier. So it was really cool to get to interview someone that sort of built a large scale PLG machine.
Yeah, but still, even if you like, no matter what kind of organization you're in, I think what I also really like, we had this blog post or a guest post from Gareth, who was at Parable back then, like 2 years ago, where he called it content-led product. So whereas like you let the content inform features and things like that, and that's kind of what she was talking about at a much larger scale, right? And I think that is really possible actually, if you have your shit together, like they clearly seem to do at Zapier, right? Where you have the intelligence and you have the numbers and you can feed those kind of back to other parts of the organization. Where it's like, we're seeing this in content, right? Where this is popular, this is gaining traction, this is not gaining any traction. There is interesting info there that's valuable beyond just the content team.
Yes.
But then you really need to run a good analytics or like a good intelligence. And that's not.
I think that there's a few different flavors of that, right? So this idea of like content-led strategy, like content-led company strategy or something, if we wanted to rename it in the moment, you can also use content as research into like point problems that you're trying to learn more about, right? So it's like, let's say you're building a content strategy and you want to figure out like, where is this audience that we're trying to target hanging out? Like, write a blog post of like, the top 5 communities for product managers, right? And go in deep there and participate and listen and like turn that into something of value. And that then is research to inform your, in this case, I said content strategy, but company strategy to some extent. I've always thought of content informing a product roadmap or a company strategy as being like, individual points of research when done well. But what she brought to the table is like, no, like take a step back. You can look at the macro, see the trends, and use some of those numbers to inform the product roadmap or the company strategy.
Yeah, she literally actually said, I wrote it down, she said something like, I want content to be a strategic engine, not a service engine or something, or not a service. And I think that's a cool way to sum it up.
I've been thinking a lot more about AI, right? Usage for content production. And I am with Lane in that having content draft articles, if we're talking about blog articles, having content like draft the thing might not be the best usage of AI. Having AI draft the content might not be the best usage, because it does take away some of the human elements and like the voice and some of the magic there. But using it at the fringes, like around, like all the process around producing a good content asset, I think is a good, safe place to implement now. She's in it, man. It was really cool.
Yeah, but I also felt like inspired in the sense of like, yeah, there's a really lot of cool stuff, but also like, we're not that far behind. It's like stuff we're also experimenting with. So it's still early, right? There's still so much to do and there's still so much opportunity. That's also inspiring and motivating.
Yeah, without a doubt. Well, thanks for listening to another episode of the Animals Podcast. We'll return a couple days with another drop from another enterprise guest.
Yeah, see you soon.